Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have another journal with me video for you today. And for all of my American viewers, I hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. The first thing that I'm adding into my journal is this shopping tag that I received with a pair of shoes that I purchased recently. I wanted to keep this shopping tag because it had a really nice message on the back, so I attached it using my crocodile and set it with an eyelet, and to add some extra interest, I tied a string around it. The next thing that I'm adding in is this photo that I took when I went on a hiking trip a few weeks ago. I went to Allegheny National Forest here in Pennsylvania, and I completed a 7-mile hike, which I was very proud of. So that was definitely something I wanted to document in my journal. I'm sort of jumping around here, but at this point I decided that my book needed to have book corners. I'm using a piece of cloth to protect the book corners so that they won't get scratched up as I'm using my pliers to tighten them. A few of you suggested this to me in one of my previous videos, and it worked out very well, so thank you so much for your suggestions. The next thing that I'm adding in is this little note that my boyfriend wrote to me. I'm basically just pulling things from my pile of junk that I've accumulated over the past few weeks. Although to me it's not a pile of junk, it's a pile of treasures and things that I want to add into my journal. So I wanted to create a pocket, and I had this idea for a crisscross style pocket. So I cut out a piece of scrapbook paper into this trapezoid type shape, and then I'm choosing a second piece of scrapbook paper and cutting it out in the same shape but in the opposite direction. And to create the pocket, I'm just going to glue these two pieces together. I like this pocket because you can choose two different papers, which makes it a little bit more fun, and just because of the way that it's shaped, it's a lot easier to pull things in and out of it. The last step for making the pocket is to simply apply glue to the 3 edges and attach it to my page. The background for the page I'm using has this sweater design, which I really like. It just feels very cozy to me. So I also wanted to decorate the pocket, so I pulled out one of my girl stickers and then layered it on top of some washi tapes, and I also added a little label that says special note inside. On this next page here, I wanted to continue journaling about my hiking trip. I had a few more photos that I took, and I also had some leftover scraps from my previous pages, and I wanted to use those to create a collage on this page. This hike was definitely one of the toughest hikes I've ever done. I was definitely unprepared because it was very muddy that day and I was not expecting that, so I did not wear the appropriate hiking shoes. I ended up falling quite a few times, but I definitely did not let that stop me from completing the hike. At one point, we came across this stream and there was no easy way of crossing it. And so we were kind of stuck until some fellow hikers told us about a log we could use to cross the stream. And that log was very difficult to cross. It was very thin, as you can see in that photo. And I also have terrible balance, so I was afraid I was going to fall in, but luckily I didn't. I just barely made it. I stumbled a few times, but I didn't fall. And I was very proud of myself, so I kind of wanted to tell that story on this journal page, which is why I'm stamping out the phrase walking across a log. I am also going to stamp out the date using my date stamp. Overall, I really love how this page turned out. I think that the colors in the collage just really capture that day very well. Okay, so I was feeling like playing around with some watercolor, so I'm just applying some washi tape to the edges of my watercolor paper That just makes it easier for me to hold onto the page as I'm painting. And I'm just playing around with some different colors. I was feeling drawn to the golden yellow and orangey colors that day, so I'm just layering them on top of each other. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm not a watercolor expert at all. Once I was satisfied with my watercoloring, I just let that dry, and then I decided to try out this random technique where I just splatter a bunch of paint onto the page. So I splattered some like red and purple colors, and I cut that down to write a little quote on top of it. And I'm using my brush marker to write out this quote that I found online, which says, "Art is the only way to run away without leaving home." When I first started watercoloring, I honestly had no idea where I was going with it. I did not have a vision for the end result, but I was just playing around and eventually came to this, and I actually really like it. That's something I really enjoy about the junk journaling process. Sometimes you have no idea what you're going to end up with, but it's really more about the process of creating. And now that I think about it, it does kind of work well with the quote that I wrote there. It's kind of similar to like running away without really knowing where you're going to end up. Once I completed my lettering, I just used my Tombow tape runner to attach the watercolor paper onto one of my pages, and I also added some washi tape on the top and bottom, but I ended up not liking how that looked and removing it later on. On the other side of the page, I decided to stick in another leaf that I laminated. On this next page, I'm journaling about one of my favorite things, and that is food. And specifically, I am talking about Japanese cheesecake, which is so delicious. If you have never had Japanese cheesecake before, I highly recommend that you try it. My aunt makes Japanese cheesecake very well, and it's super delicious, but I don't get to see her very often, so I wanted to try and make my own Japanese cheesecake. So my mom and I tried out a few different recipes, and we found the one that tastes the best. And so I printed out a photo of the cheesecake that we made, and then I also layered some scraps of paper underneath just to make it a little bit more interesting, because having just the photo glued onto the page would look a little bit boring. I also cut out a half sheet of ledger paper and glued that to the opposite side of the page. On this paper, I'm going to be writing out the recipe for the Japanese cheesecake that we liked the best. So I first lettered Japanese cheesecake using this kind of funky font. I actually messed up the J initially, and then I just kind of wrote all of my letters a little bit wonky. So at the top, I just wrote out the ingredients needed and the measurements. And then at the bottom, I just wrote out the instructions for creating the Japanese cheesecake. So if you're interested in trying out this recipe, you can just follow the instructions that I've written here. Let me know if you do try it. It is very delicious. It would be a great recipe to try for the holidays. As a final touch, I added this little sticker, and that is pretty much it for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks for watching!